Well, let's speak to Robert Bates now. He is from the Centre for Migration Control. He's their research director. Robert, thanks for joining us today. Will, I mean, there have been so many announcements over the summer, really, and we know that Yvette Cooper has a lot of policy around this. Will what she's talked about today, will what she's announced and done over the summer actually solve this problem or make it slightly better?
Well, look, I think she has inherited a situation from the Conservatives that was pretty bad. But the question is whether the Labour Party's approach over the last year and what they're setting out today is actually big enough to have that seismic impact on the small boats crossings. I think the low-hanging fruit was, of course, suspending asylum family reunification visas for a period of time. That had gone completely out of control, exploded from about 4,000 to 20,000 in just a few years. So that was something that obviously needed to happen. But the way the Labour Party are reorientating this conversation is about reducing the use of hotels. And of course, as many people know, that then leads to things like HMOs, but it also means to an expediting of asylum applications. And the concern there is whether these applications, which are already facing many faults in terms of resourcing and actual accuracy in determining whether someone's legitimate, are actually just going to end up leading to more illegitimate asylum seekers being given refugee status. So you can have as much throughput through the hotels and the accommodation as you want, but if you're not putting in place a strong deterrent to actually stop people from coming across the boat, and as Chris Philp has pointed out, it's up, nearly 40% on last year, then you're going to continue to end up with pressure on your dispersal and contingency accommodation. And we know that the government is actually now struggling at the moment to find some of that dispersal accommodation. It's sort of reached a plateau at around 60,000. So there's a lot of problems still here. And I think the Labour Party are again trying to reorientate the conversation away from talking about what it needs to talk about, which is a strong deterrent, such as the Rwanda plan, but with the enhancement of leaving the ECHR attached to that, of course.
It's interesting in regard to mentioning the ECHR. I think this is the next big political debate that's coming. We're having it already on this station, and as usual, we're ahead of the debate. In terms of the European Convention on Human Rights, where do you think the politics lies on this? Because I've got a former Labour Special Advisor coming up next who'll ask this question too as well. But I just want to ask you, Robert, I mean, there are clearly people on the backbenches of the Labour Party, like Graham Stringer, for example, long-serving backbench MP, who says that withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights is something that Labour should do and should consider. We have others like my former boss, Robert Buckland, the former Justice Secretary, Sir Robert Buckland, saying that actually it's akin to brain surgery. It's so difficult to actually get ourselves out of the ECHR. How realistic is it that we do it? How realistic is it to do it, do you think, Robert, especially when it comes to asylum?
Well, I think it is necessary, and I think the Overton window has shifted well and truly in that direction. The main problem, and I think the only sticking block that would have really been held up, was, of course, the Belfast Agreement. But we've seen, even on the Labour side of things, people such as Jack Straw coming out and saying that he doesn't think that membership remaining within the ECHR is something that's essential to keep that in place as well. So I think
David Blunkett as well, certainly, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So some big grandees that probably Keir Starmer could do without their intervention. He's probably caused them a bit of a headache, because obviously Starmer has made it very clear that they don't have any plan to actually leave it. They're talking about reconfiguring how some of it's applied in courts, especially the certain articles, right to life and right to family, and freedom from torture as well. But I think where we are now is there's so much intellectual energy on this front of leaving the ECHR, and it has such a sort of common sense backbone to it as well that just resonates with where the ordinary public are. If we're not able to remove people that are broken into our country illegally because of a charter, then of course it makes absolute sense for it to leave. So I think the Keir Starmer is going to see this as a running sore for a very long period of time, because he obviously, from his ideological underpinnings, is very much wedded to it. But if you do have people such as the Labour Party grandees coming out and saying we don't really think this is appropriate anymore, then I think it's something that really has shifted where the conversation is, much more so than it was even a year ago.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just sit tight for a second, Robert, because I want to remind ourselves what the Home Secretary has been setting out in the House of Commons in the past hour. Then I'll get Robert's reaction.
We need to close all asylum hotels, and we need to do so for good. But that must be done in a controlled and orderly manner, and not through a return to the previous government's chaos that led to the opening of hotels in the first place. Substantial reforms are needed now. In our first year in government, we've taken immediate action, laying the foundations for more fundamental reform. We have restored asylum decision-making and then rapidly increased the rate of decisions. The overall system remains sclerotic, outdated and unfair. So as we committed in the Immigration White Paper, we will shortly set out more radical reforms to modernise the asylum system and to boost our border security, tackling the pull factors, strengthening enforcement, making sure people are treated fairly, reforming the way that the ECHR is interpreted here at home, speeding up the system, cutting numbers and ending the use of hotels.
We can also take a look at what the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has been saying about Labour's immigration proposals. She said this earlier today.
What they have done with their recent court case is actually show that they believe that illegal migrants have more rights than our local communities, and we completely disagree with that. We had a deportation bill, which we asked Labour to support. They talked about disapplying the Human Rights Act, so you wouldn't even get to some of the circumstances that she's talking about. There is a lot more that can be done on immigration control. Labour do not have the stomach to do it. We do, and we have the plans as well.
Kemi Badenoch raining on Yvette Cooper's parade there. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including David in the Cotswolds, who says instead of Yvette Cooper commending her statement to the House, she should have commended her statement to the bin. She never mentioned illegal immigrants or illegal immigrant hotels, preferring to use asylum hotels, and never mentioned where these illegal immigrants will go. Starmer, Cooper and the whole of the Labour movement have not read the room and do not understand the will of the British people. Sling them out, says David. Well, Robert Bates is still with us from the Centre for Migration Control. What do you make of what both Kemi Badenoch and Yvette Cooper have been saying there, Robert?
Well, the Labour Party have done a lot of things, but the problem is none of them are big enough to actually make the impact. We saw Starmer talking about the removals and the enforced returns that he's clearly very proud of. But let's be perfectly clear. Only 4% of those that have arrived on small boats are those that have actually been removed. A very large number of those are, as you say, people that have overstayed visas or other foreign national offenders as well. So when it actually comes to those that are coming across the channel illegally, it's only about 4% that have been returned. On Badenoch, I don't really think the Conservatives can boast about having had a comprehensive plan. I was looking for it because I've constantly been hearing that they did have this really detailed plan.
If there was a comprehensive plan, you'd know about it, Robert.
Well, I'd like to think so, and with the greatest respect,
quite literally your job to know these things, and you haven't seen a comprehensive plan, which makes me wonder whether one actually exists.
Well, there is that. I don't think there is one actually out there in circulation at the moment. I think it's something where everyone's talking top lines, but no one's actually doing the thought and processing of how this happens. I think we're getting the fundamentals in place in the national conversation, leaving the ECHR a commitment to actually deporting all those that enter illegally. But when it comes to the operational side of things, I still think there's a lot more that we need to be doing to talk about how that can take place and how that can be gone about. With those third country agreements, with the detention facilities, which are woefully underfunded, with immigration enforcement and so forth. So I'd like to see a lot more from the Conservatives and the Reform Party on that front. I do think that though the conversation is going in a positive way, and let's see what the Conservatives come up with at their conference regarding the ECHR.
It's interesting as well in regard to Reform UK. They've talked about council tax bills, cutting them. We'll talk about that later in the programme. But for the meantime, Robert, thank you. That's Robert Bates there from the Centre for Migration Control. He's their research director.